Which is what if half-demon Naruto built the ultimate harem with Sakura, Ino, Hinata, Anko, Ayame, Tsume, Hana, Hyuga, Kurenai, Fem Haku, Fem Jashin, Fem Hidan, Fu, Yugito, Tenten, Tayuya, Kin, Karui, Samui, Shion, Koyuki, Mei, Tsunami, Tsunade, Natsuhi, Konan, and Fem Kyubi. Part 11. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Konoha. 3 days later. A burly elderly man flipped through the file he had just received about the purple-haired girl that sat across the table from him, her knees held closely to her chest as her eyes, seemingly dead inside with no light, stared at the cold concrete floor. Reaching up, he stroked his long white beard as he read over the file, a scowl etched across his aging face. His dark brown eyes casually flickering between the document and the girl. This was Guken Salto, otherwise known as the Mind Flayer, due to the elder man's reputation of being able to see through the lies, or if someone was hiding something with a mere glance. With a soft grunt, he continued to read her file. Name: Anko Mitarashi. Age 8. Height 124 centimeters. Weight 17.2 kilograms. Blood type: A. Affiliation: Konohagakure no Sato. Shinobi registration number 011226. Rank: Status: Genin Kunoichi, former apprentice of Orochimaru of the Sannin. Description: when brought in for examination, Anko Mitarashi was severely malnourished. Her body also showed signs of constant experimentation performed on her, without her consent. Due to the indication of abrasions along her wrist, neck, and ankles. Indicating that she had been secured and struggled against her bindings while these experiments were carried out. No evidence of sexual-related abuse found. From Inoichi's mental evaluation, Mitarashi has become mentally withdrawn and will shy away from anyone's touch, with the exception of Anbu Neko, whom was tasked to look after Mitarashi after she had been discovered locked in a cage in Umi no Kuni. Currently, Neko seems to be the only individual that Mitarashi will willingly allow to engage in physical contact with. Currently, it is unknown just how deep Mitarashi's mental scars are. After a thorough medical and mental evaluation, coupled with the evidence retrieved from the abandoned base in Umi no Kuni, it is my belief that Anko Mitarashi is innocent of all wrongdoings and is another unfortunate victim of Orochimaru's manipulation and betrayal. Signed, Anbu Commander Ryu. Anko Mitarashi. The deep voice of the large elderly man boomed, prompting the girl to stiffen before she cast her eyes upwards to bald man. I have just read the report delivered by Anbu Commander Ryu. He paused, allowing for the tension to build, seeing if she would crack under the pressure and reveal something that the Anbu teams had overlooked. While cruel to do this to a child who had already suffered so much, as head of the Torture and Interrogation Division of Konoha, Guken had to ensure that no stone was left unturned. His eyes softened slightly as he saw her demeanor remain unchanged, indicating that she had nothing to hide. Though he surmised that she was no doubt afraid of being found guilty of crimes that were not her own. After reviewing your evaluation, combined with the evidence discovered in Umi no Kuni, Commander Ryu has determined that you were an unfortunate victim to Orochimaru's machinations. Guken stated, letting the folder fall to the table. And I am inclined to agree with his report. Hearing this, young Anko couldn't help but look up at the man in pure shock. With the way the Anbu known as Usagi had looked at her, and the words he said, coupled with the glares and comments made by random civilians they had passed when they had returned to Konoha, she had all but resigned herself to pay for the sins that the bastard had committed. However, I will not lie to you. The elder man sighed, bringing his large hand up to rub his bald head. Despite being innocent, there are still those that will disregard that verdict and still blame you for what he did. Anko frowned at this, but nodded in acknowledgement. She had already seen the glares and heard the whispering from not only the civilians they had passed, but also a handful of shinobi as well. Which is why Anbu Neko has offered to allow you to move into her apartment. Guken smiled, both for your own protection, and to allow you time to re-acclimate yourself. As if on cue, the door to the interrogation room opened, revealing the young cat-masked Anbu member that was just mentioned mere seconds ago. Right on time, Neko. Guken stated as he stood to his full height, towered over the two girls. Anko-san, you are free to go. Neko, you are allowed to use any means you deem necessary to keep both Anko-san and yourself safe. Understood, Guken-sama. Neko bowed before turning back towards the young purple-haired Kunoichi. Silently, she extended a friendly hand towards her newfound friend. As the two departed, the elderly man couldn't help but frown. Knowing full well that despite being found innocent, the poor girl would still have to bear the burden of her now former sensei's sins. Letting out a sigh, the man turned around and re-entered the interrogation room. Waiting for his next victim. Anko. Age -12. It had been 4 years since Anko was brought back to Konoha after her bastard of a sensei's betrayal. True to Guken's word, many of the villagers, both civilian and shinobi alike, blamed her for Orochimaru's actions. More than a few had been stupid enough to attempt their own perverted sense of justice when they attempted to break into Neko's apartment to make the traitor's bitch pay for her crimes against them, only to be met the edge of Neko's blade. 6 months after returning to the village, Hiruzen had placed her in a genin team that comprised of Kurenai Yuhi, an up-and-coming genjutsu prodigy, and Hana Inuzuka, the eldest child of Tsume and next in line to be the Inuzuka clan head after her mother. At first, Anko had been apprehensive of being placed on a team, fear evident in her eyes despite how hard she tried to hide it behind her developing mask of being flirty and boastful. Fear that her new teammates would look at her and treat her the same as the rest of the village had done so far. However, her outlook had shifted when she saw who the Jonin sensei was for this all-kunoichi team. Hyuga Uzuki, otherwise known to Anko as Anbu Neko, had temporarily resigned from her Anbu position to train this all-kunoichi team. Partially to ease Anko back into the active roster of the shinobi forces, and partially to help her younger sister-like figure to gain new friendships. Another reason, of course, was the primary cause as to why this particular team was lacking a third member and a Jonin sensei to begin with. It seemed that the sole male genin of the team had been extremely possessive over both kunoichi and had all but claimed that they were both his and that they had no say in the matter. Which was further compounded by the fact that the disgraced former Jonin sensei over the team had encouraged the boy's behavior. This of course had earned both males a savage beat down at the hands of an enraged Tsume Inuzuka, leaving both a bloody mess and barely alive. Currently, both were in intensive care due to the severity of their injuries, with a prison cell awaiting their recovery. Fortunately, with a little pushing from Hyuga, the 4 kunoichi bonded quickly and formed a near sister-like connection to one another. Something the budding snake mistress needed, desperately. As the team bonded and performed missions together, their reputation of being efficient and deadly team grew, with various shinobi and kunoichi from other villages calling them Shino Tenshi, the Angels of Death. The girls had also gained a second nickname within Konoha itself, the 4 Ice Queens. Due to the girls' reputation of turning down practically any male, and sometimes even females, that approached them. Sometimes in brutal fashion, for those that didn't take no as an answer. Though of the 4, Anko had it the worst, as many had approached her under the assumption that she would be so desperate for acceptance that she would easily climb into bed with them. Of course, when she rejected them, oftentimes in brutal fashion, they would hurl insults at her. Bitch, whore, snake whore and more, all to further sully her already stained reputation. While she never showed it, hiding behind her emotional mask, their insults stung. However, with the help of her sister-like figures, she pushed through it. Another positive event that had happened over the past 4 years was when Anko was informed via a purple and red snake summon, that Manda and those aligned with him and Orochimaru had been exiled from the snake clan, making Anko the sole, true, snake summoner. Something the snake mistress took great pleasure in, knowing that it had to sting both Manda's and Orochimaru's pride to be cast out like that, forcing them to create a weaker summoning contract, which also cut off the disgraced snake Sanin of learning the snake sage mode. Today, however, was a bittersweet day for the budding snake mistress of Konoha. Not even 24 hours ago, her team had dominated the Chunin exams, earning all 3 members their promotion to the rank of Chunin. Of course, there had been some pushback from the elders and civilian council about Anko's promotion, citing some bullshit that it was too early and that she could still be a spy for Orochimaru, but Hiruzen had stood firm and granted her promotion. While she was happy that she had finally earned some recognition within the village, aside from being the former apprentice of a traitor, it also meant the end of her team. Hyuga would be returning to Anbu, having been offered the position of Anbu commander due to her impressive record and leadership skills. Kurenai had aspirations of becoming a Jonin sensei for a team and pass on her knowledge of genjutsu. Hana was content with her current rank, and simply wanted to run the veterinary clinic for her clan. While Anko herself was offered an apprenticeship under Ibiki Morino, the newly appointed head of the torture and interrogation division. So, with a promise to always be there for one another, each went their separate ways. Anko, age 14. A grinning Anko casually made her way down the road as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the village in a fiery orange light as she munched on what was left of her dango stick. The reason she was grinning was simply due to the fact that not only had she just broken Ibiki's record in getting someone to crack, but she had also been given a field promotion to Tokubetsu Jonin. Stopping for a moment, she looked down at her current attire and frowned slightly. In the past 6 years since she had been brought back to Konoha, she hadn't done anything to change her look. She still wore her hair up in her typical pineapple ponytail, and still wore the same burgundy t-shirt and khaki shorts. While her hair style suited her, since she honestly couldn't imagine her wearing it in any other style, her outfit had to go. She needed something that screamed sexy and dangerous. A trench coat like Ibiki wore would give her an intimidating appearance, as well as a means to hide various weapons and other means of attack. Perhaps a full-body chain mesh to give her that sexy appeal. However, her musing of what her future outfit would consist of was cut short as a commotion off to the left over her caught her attention. Looking over, she saw what appeared to be an 8-year-old blonde boy running from a mob of drunks, and from the looks of it, some shinobi as well. Scowling at the sight, Anko jumped to the roofs and gave chase. As she pursued the mob, she watched as one of the mob members pulled ahead of the group, clearly a shinobi of Chunin rank at least. Cursing as she saw the blonde kid turn down an alleyway she knew was a dead end. "You're pretty fast for a demon brat," she overheard the Chunin say as she came to a stop at the edge of the building overlooking the alleyway. "Yeah, well, when you have morons constantly trying to kill you, you learn to move fast," was the blonde's response, prompting the snake mistress to crack a grin at the kid's attitude. By now, the rest of the mob had caught up with the duo. All showing to be breathing heavily, clearly unhappy about the impromptu cardio exercise that was forced upon them. "Well, you won't have to worry about that anymore," the Chunin stated, producing a kunai from his pouch and twirling it between his fingers, hoping to intimidate the 8-year-old. "Because you won't survive after tonight." Silently, Anko summoned a single snake and wordlessly ordered it to slither down the drainage pipe to her right as she took out her own kunai. Her eyes narrowing at the Chunin, watching as the mon's muscles tensed, indicating he was about to throw his weapon. It had happened in the blink of an eye. The Chunin had launched his kunai towards the blonde kid and Anko had let her own fly instantly, knocking the first out of the air. Knowing she had revealed herself, the snake mistress jumped down from the roof and landed in between the mob of villagers and the kid. "You lot are pretty brave when teaming up against a kid," Anko commented in a condescending tone, twirling a kunai in her fingers as her eyes flickered over the mob gathered in front of her. No surprise the snake whore would defend the demon brat. The Chunin spat as he glared at the 14-year-old kunoichi in front of him. Hearing the standard insult hurled at her, Anko's expression morphed into a scowl before turning into a sinister grin as she saw the snake she had summoned earlier had reached its destination. Twitching her finger ever so slightly, she commanded the snake to attack. Without warning, the snake struck, sinking its fangs deep into the Chunin's calf, injecting a lethal amount of venom as it did so. Screaming out in pain, the man kicked the snake away before turning back to the woman before him. In a last-ditch effort in killing not only the disgraced snake whore, but the demon brat as well, he launched one final kunai with an explosive tag attached to it. Seeing the explosive tag burning, Anko cursed loudly and turned, lunging towards the blonde-haired boy, covering him just as the explosion went off, sending massive amounts of shrapnel and other debris all over the alleyway. Grunting as she felt multiple impacts along her back, followed by a cold feeling, indicating that she had been critically injured by the shrapnel. Groaning slightly, she willed herself up, only to look up just as the wall they were next to fall over, burying the two of them under it. And the blackness. An unknown amount of time had passed before she slowly returned to the world of consciousness, warmth returning to her body. Slowly, she tried to push herself up off the ground, prompting her newly acquired companion to scurry over to her side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" the blonde asked with genuine concern. "The hell happened?" she asked, trying to shake off the disorientating feeling in her head. "You saved me from the mob that was trying to kill me," he answered. "Why did you risk yourself to save me?" "Because you needed help," she shrugged. In truth, she was well aware of who, or rather, what the boy was. It was rather hard not to with how the civilians and even some of the shinobi would talk about the boy. Though she never did learn his name. It was either Demon Brat, or Fox Brat, or sometimes just plain old Demon. Seriously, the villagers here really needed to expand their vocabulary when it came to insults and names. However, she noticed one crucial fact that was starting to eat away at the back of her mind. She remembered the kunai being thrown, the explosive tag going off, and her jumping to cover the boy, the impacts on her back and then, blackness. Even if her injuries were superficial, she should be feeling some sort of soreness. Instead, she felt perfectly fine. Even better than fine, she also noticed that she seemed a bit more sensitive to her surroundings. "What happened to me?" she asked, looking in the direction the boy's voice had come from, due to the fading light obscuring her vision. Only barely able to make out his silhouette as the scattered moonlight filtered through the cracks in the rubble, before disappearing again behind a cloud. "You were badly hurt." The blonde sighed heavily. "In order to save you, I had to do something, and I hope you won't be too upset." Anko frowned at this. She could hear the remorse in his voice. Whatever he had to do, he felt guilty about it. "Your injuries were life-threatening," he continued, no doubt taking her lack of response as a sign to continue. "In order to save your life, I had to mark you." "Mark me," she nearly growled out. "Yes." The boy sighed, swallowing thickly. "Truth is, the villagers are right, I am a demon. Or at least a half-demon, thanks to their attack on me 2 years ago. So in order to save your life, I had to mark you as a mate." Anko couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had a mark on her. Another damn mark, and this time given to her by a kid no less. "Sorry, potential mate, this stuff is still pretty new to me." He quickly spoke with a nervous chuckle, prompting the snake mistress to narrow her eyes slightly, since it seemed like someone was talking to the kid that only he could hear. "Great," she sighed, leaning back slightly in reluctant acceptance. "Another mark. I may as well just start collecting them since I seem to attract them." "You only have one," the blonde informed her. "What do you mean only one?" she questioned, looking in his direction once more. "I got marked by that snake bastard 6 years ago. My mark overpowered his and destroyed it," he explained as the moon shone through the cracks once more, completely illuminating the area. For her part, she was taken back by how handsome the boy looked, despite being a good 6 years younger than her. His blue eyes seemed to glow in the darkness, giving off a sense of intimidation as well as a sense of comfort at the same time. Even more so, she was shocked that she had finally been freed from the snake bastard by this boy. Slowly reaching up, she trailed her fingers across where the curse mark once was, only to find nothing. No lumps, scarring or anything to show that it was there. She did, however, feel a slight rise in her skin where her new mark was. Though she couldn't quite make out the design as she traced her fingers around it, making a mental note to take a look at it in a mirror as soon as she could. "Don't worry, it should disappear in a week or so," the blonde Hanyu continued. "The only way it would stay is if you were to mark me to accept it in this, agreeing to be my mate for life." "And just how would I mark you?" she inquired with a slight grin as the clouds covered the moon once more, delving the two into darkness once more. Having had a chance to get a good look at him up close, she could see that he was rather cute and that he would turn out to be handsome as he grew more. Not to mention, while in an unorthodox way, he had freed her from the last hold Orochimaru had on her. But above all, his primary concern was to save her life. Perhaps he was the one. "Same way I marked you," he replied with a small shrug, unaware of the snake mistress's thoughts. "You would have to bite my shoulder and inject your chakra into me so that they mix and form a bond. However, doing this will also change you into a Hanyu as well." Without giving the blonde time to react, Anko moved forward and grabbed the young boy. Sinking her teeth into his left shoulder, drawing blood, channeling her chakra through her teeth and pushing it into his body. Grunting as she felt him clamp down on her own neck before feeling the foreign chakra enter her body, bring forth a sense of euphoria. Once she was done, Anko sat back and wiped the blood from the corner of her lips, giving it a timid lick from her fingers and noted how sweet it tasted. However, as she did so, she forgot one crucial detail about what she had just done. "So what's your name?" she asked, embarrassed. "Shouldn't we have established that before we mated for life?" Her now mate quirked a brow, followed by a small chuckle. "Anyways, I am Naruto Uzumaki, resident demon brat. The sexy and no longer single, Anko Mitarashi." Anko introduced herself, feeling a sense of contentment and warmth simply by near him. "Nice to meet you," he smiled, a smile she would come to cherish in the years to come. The void. Anko let out a gasp of air, as she shot up in a sitting position, breathing heavily as she eagerly sucked in as much oxygen as she could into her lungs. Bringing her hands up, and covering her sweaty face, rubbing along her hairline before letting her hands drop to her chest area, patting herself down. She was able to find the hole in her mesh coverings from the bastard's sword, but couldn't find the wound it had inflicted. How? She whispered as she continued to assess her body for any injuries she knew she had sustained in her fight against her former sensei. Only to come up empty-handed. It was then she noticed she was no longer in the forest of death, but rather a bizarre place she couldn't recognize. Instead of massive trees, she was met with a skyline of floating islands of various sizes drifted in front of her. Some of the larger chunks having the remnants of what appeared to be buildings on them, falling apart. The closer she looked at the various destroyed or simply unfinished buildings, the more she realized they looked like they were part of Konoha. If the village was suddenly destroyed and then frozen in time, floating endlessly in whatever abyss she was now located in. Where the f am I? The snake mistress inquired out loud. You are in the void. Came a regal, feminine voice from behind her, prompting Anko to spin around, her eyes widening as she identified who the voice belonged to. Jashin-sama, the snake mistress voiced as she peered at the back of the crouched form of the goddess of blood and carnage that she worshipped. Her beautiful silver hair cascading down her back. What are? The words died in her mouth as her eyes landed on the prone figure that Jashin was kneeling next to. His long flowing coat, that held a unique sheen to it, splayed out on the ground. His face, that she adored staring at, covered in sweat and deathly pale. His trembling lips a horrible shade of blue. His hands clutched together tightly above his chest, shivering violently, as if he were trying to wrestle some invisible beast. No, she breathed out, quickly scurrying over to the other side of her fallen lover and mate, directly across from where Jashin currently was. No, 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 he took the poison into himself. Jashin informed the snake mistress, her tone betraying nothing. To save you. Tentatively, she reached up and caressed his cheek, noting how cold it felt to her skin. However, as she did so, she came to a crushing realization that pained her very soul. This was her fault. If she hadn't foolishly tried to fight Orochimaru on her own, then he wouldn't be in the condition he was in currently. No doubt, he would already be at the center tower with his team and Sakura-chan. You're all right, I'm glad. A weak voice croaked, prompting the snake mistress to cast her eyes on her mate's face. Tears forming in her eyes as she gazed into his frail blue eyes. She didn't want to see him like this, knowing that it was her fault. Don't cry, hubby Heim. Naruto weakly smiled, struggling to bring his hand up to wipe her tears away. It's my fault, she sniffled, closing her eyes as she held his hand close to her face. No, Anko-chan. He shook his head, gently pulling his hand away to let it rest on his chest. I should have pushed harder for you to train in your Hanyu abilities. If I had, you would have easily humiliated that bastard. Shish, you need to rest, Naruto-kun. Jashin smiled as she placed a slender finger over his lips, before weaving her delicate fingers over his face with her free hand, prompting him to fall asleep. Her crimson eyes then cast their sight on the distressed snake mistress. He is correct, you know. Anko visibly stiffened. Naruto-kun may have freed you from Orochimaru's cursed seal, the goddess began, gliding over to the crestfallen Kunoichi. Placing a slender digit under the snake mistress's chin, prompting her to look into her crimson eyes. But you have yet to free yourself. The purple-haired Hanyu looked at the goddess in confusion, not understanding what she meant. You still bear the scars of what Orochimaru did, inside you. Jashin began to explain. There is a part of you that still does not allow you to fully trust anyone, regardless of who it is. Be it Hyuga-chan, Ibiki-san, and even Naruto-kun. You allowed them to instruct you in new techniques, but you have never given your full trust in any of them to get close enough to fully teach you. Anko sobbed, feeling extremely vulnerable before the goddess. Mainly because Jashin was correct. She never fully let anyone in after Orochimaru's betrayal, only accepting brief explanations and scrolls to learn new techniques. She had politely refused when Hyuga had offered to teach her Kenjutsu, and when Naruto had eagerly offered to guide her through her newly acquired Hanyu abilities at the time, she always made up some excuse that she didn't have time. All because in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered. They'll betray you, like he did. And she had listened to it, like a fool, thinking she was protecting herself from being hurt again, from being betrayed again. Instead, her lover and mate was hurt. All because of her. Casting her eyes to her prone lover, she made a silent vow. Never, never again will she allow her fear control her again. You know what you must do, don't you, Anko-chan? Jashin smiled, seeing the resolve begin to flicker to life in the snake mistress's light brown eyes. earning a nod from the purple-haired Kunoichi as she composed herself and wiped away the tears. Yes, Jashin-sama, Anko finally spoke, holding her head up high with confidence. I need to get rid of the last of my doubt and fear in order to fully free myself. Good, Jashin smiled again. Now, I must send you back, as I have already done with the others. Others, the other girls. The goddess chuckled lightly, many of which had abandoned their duties to be at the side of their lover in his time of pain and anguish. Wait, what about Naruto-kun? Anko inquired. He will survive, Jashin reassured her. My champion will not perish to some poison, though he will be out of commission for the next few hours, at least. Now, let's send you back so you may carry out your duties and warn your Hokage of Orochimaru's presence within the exams. With a flick of her wrist, the goddess opened a portal to the location not far from where the battle between the Snake Sannin and the Snake Mistress took place, prompting the Kunoichi to travel through it, though not before stealing one last glance at Naruto before she departed. Closing the portal, Jashin turned her attention to her fallen champion. To sacrifice yourself in order to save those precious to you, Naruto-kun. She smiled, kneeling next to him once more. Even at the risk of incurring my wrath, you truly are remarkable. Perhaps I should observe the remainder of these exams in person. Leaning in, she pressed her blood-red lips to his, channeling a bit more of her power into her chosen champion, and eventual king, when the time would be right. Kintsuchi never considered herself a superstitious person that believed in bad omens, but everything about her team's latest mission just gave her a bad feeling in the pit of her stomach as she watched over the large mound of dirt that created a protective shell around her team's target. Their initial orders before entering the village was to keep an eye on one Sasuke Uchiha, though for what reason they were never told. Only to keep an eye on the young teenager and evaluate his performance. So far, she had not seen anything worthy of note. Admittedly, the teenage raven-haired boy was ahead of most of his peers, no doubt thanks to his clan's extensive library filled with jutsu and other techniques, both original and copied from enemy shinobi. Nothing really stood out as truly remarkable that would garner Orochimaru's attention. Not like the snake bastard ever filled them in on what he was planning. No one, with the exception of Kabuto, was aware of what the disgraced Sannin was planning. Not even his elite guard, the Sound 4 that her best friend and sister-like figure was part of, formerly known as the Sound 5. Now, not even a full 24 hours ago, her team had been given a new mission. Track down and eliminate not just Sasuke Uchiha, but also his pink-haired teammate Sakura Haruno. It was this reason that the black-haired Oto Kunoichi had a bad feeling in the pit of her stomach. Behind her, the spiky-haired male genin were snickering quietly to the other as he vocally discussed his plan for the lone Konoha Kunoichi to his bandaged teammate of what he was going to do with the pink-haired bitch before killing her. Commenting on how such a fine body would be a waste to just let rot before experiencing it first, making Kin scowl in disgust, silently promising that she would mercifully kill Sakura before the two of them could defile her. We've waited long enough, let's go. Dosu whispered, annoyance in his voice as he was becoming quickly irritated with Zaku's yammering about his plans for the pink-haired Kunoichi, before turning to Zaku and Kin. Watch for traps. You mean those pathetic rope traps the dumb bitch set up? Zaku asked with a sneer, pointing out the obvious disturbed dirt that was meant to hide the ropes and such around the campsite. Orochimaru-sama warned us not to underestimate her. Kin hissed, reminding her arrogant teammate of what they were told. While the Snake Sannin didn't go into detail about why exactly, he made it very clear that they were not to underestimate the girl at all. Enough, both of you. The bandaged genin commanded when he saw the spiky-haired teen about to retort. It is clear that this bitch purposely set up false traps to lure enemy teams into a false sense of security and catch them off guard with the real traps. To prove his point, Dosu threw a single kunai into a seemingly clear area, only for a rope to snap into action and bring a massive log swinging across the pathway that would have easily crushed any of them had them been hit by it. Not to mention the injuries they would have sustained had they survived the initial blow of the devastating trap. Zaku could only look on his horror as his eyes began to scan the treetops and foliage for any other traps, though it was near impossible as nearly everything perfectly blended in. For her part, Kin was impressed with the amount of strength it would have required to move such a log to position it as such. Silently, she prayed she wouldn't fall victim to any of the Konoha Kunoichi's other traps that no doubt still littered the forest floor. Inside the earth dome, Sakura's head drooped tiredly as she leaned back against the dirt wall that made up their impromptu shelter, built within the hollowed-out tree trunk of one of the massive trees. It had been 2 days since Orochimaru had attacked her team. 2 days since the snake bastard marked the Uchiha and had even attempted to mark herself with his curse mark. Sakura scoffed at this, as if she would bear the mark of anyone else other than her mate. Speaking of her mate, the Pinkett cast her eyes on the still form of Naruto. His fever had finally broke the night before, and his breathing had returned to normal this morning. It had still been nerve-wracking for the pink-haired Hanyu to see her mate in such a condition. So weak and vulnerable, a far cry from how she was used to seeing him. It was this reason that Sakura had not slept at all in the past 2 days, despite Jashin's assurances that her champion would survive. A small part of her had wanted to blame the snake mistress for the condition their mate was in, but that part of her was silenced. Because she knew that Naruto would not want her, or any of them, to blame Anko for what he decided to do. Knowing full well that the whiskered Hanyu would do the same for any of them, should they ever find themselves in such circumstances. Reaching up, she gently rubbed her mate Mark. Through it, she could feel the worry and concern from the others, as well as a large amount of self-loathing coming from the snake mistress herself, making Sakura frown. There was no doubt in the Pinkett's mind that Anko was blaming herself for the condition Naruto was in. After we get out of here, we should gather everyone to talk with her. Inner commented, concern laced within her voice. Let her know that we don't blame her for what happened. Yeah, Sakura mentally agreed. While we are all worried about Naruto-kun, Anko-chan is taking it the worst out of all of us. However, before she could continue her inner dialogue, a noise of a heavy object swinging through the air caught her attention. Someone or something had triggered one of her more hidden traps on purpose. Focusing chakra to her ears, she could make out the muttered whispering between 3 people. Took longer than I thought it would, she mused, having expected at least a team or 2 to attempt to attack them while the other 2 were sleeping. Using her chakra, she manipulated the earth that surrounded them to give her a small opening from the side for her to exit through, closing it behind her to prevent any potential threat from attacking her defenseless teammates. Even if the Uchiha was a self-absorbed prick, he was still her teammate and a fellow comrade, she would still defend him. Though if she had to choose between her mate or the Uchiha, well, the choice was obvious. Well, a snide voice sounded from the Pinkett's left. Looks like the bitch saved us some trouble. Looking over, Sakura could see the 3 genin from Otogakure, the new village according to what Kabuto had told them before the written exam, as indicated by the musical note on their Hite 8. Her green eyes scanned over the 3 intruders, reading their stances and making mental notes of openings they were exposing unknowingly. Heh, the bandaged, hunched-over genin chuckled. Looks like you've been up the past 2 days standing guard. Not good, especially when there are countless teams looking to prey upon vulnerable targets, like yourself. So how about you be an obedient bitch and show us a good time? I'm sure you can take us both at the same time. The spiky-haired boy commented with a lecherous grin, not hiding the intent behind his words. Maybe if you perform well enough, we can talk Orochimaru-sama into allowing us to keep you as a pet to sat our needs. Hell, I'll even let your blonde boyfriend watch, before I slit his throat. Sakura merely scowled in disgust, as if she would ever willingly allow herself to submit to another man's touch. She did however take notice that the lone female of the group also seemed disgusted with her teammate's words. Wordlessly, she produced a kunai from her holster on her right leg that she had reclaimed nearly a day ago, holding it in a reverse grip position while taking a defensive stance. Even in her tired state, she was confident that she had more than enough strength to take care of these 3. Though after the bastard's last comment, her Hanyu instincts screamed for his blood. Why do bitches always have to be so damn stubborn? The same spiky-haired boy sighed, though his eyes showed that he was eager for the coming fight. Oh well, don't matter to me. Your warm corpse will still get me off. Would you shut the up, Zaku? The sole female hissed, glaring at her teammate. We have a mission to complete. We don't want to listen to your sick fucking fantasies, so keep that micro-pecker you call inside your pants. What was that, kin? The identified Zaku grinned, turning his attention to his female teammate. You want to take her place? Try it, asshole, the dark-haired Kunoichi challenged, brandishing her Senbon needles. I'll rip that thimble you call off. Enough, you 2, the bandaged genin commanded, glaring at the other 2. Kin is right, Zaku, we have a job to do and you really don't wanna piss her off, do you? PFF'd, whatever dosu, Zaku scoffed. I ain't afraid of that red-headed bitch. Then you are a fool. Now enough playing around, the now identified dosu commented, turning his attention back to their target. Unfortunately for you, Orochimaru-sama has ordered us to kill you and the Uchiha, nothing personal. Then you won't take it personally when I rip your head off. Sakura bit back as she crouched lower, preparing to launch herself at the one she figured was the leader of the group as she leaked a considerable amount of killer intent, causing the three Oto genin to break out into a cold sweat. Without giving any of the trio a chance to brace themselves, Sakura shot out her right arm at nearly inhuman speed, firing off her kunai towards the spiky-haired bastard that was making such disparaging remarks about his intent with her, specifically aiming for his crotch. While Zaku was distracted with protecting his most valued possessions, Sakura launched herself from where she stood and was on top of Dosu. Gripping him by the throat, she lifted him up in the air with strength that betrayed her petite body and slammed him down hard into the ground, creating a small crater the size of his body, kicking up a large amount of dust, rocks and various other debris. Dosu spat out a large glop of blood from the impact, due to the crimson stain that formed on his facial bandages. Without hesitation, she turned on her heel with her other leg extended, catching Zaku with a devastating kick to the side of the head that sent the genin careening towards a tree. Hitting it with such impact that it shook the tree. Kin could only look on in both awe and fear as she witnessed the pink-haired Kunoichi easily dispatch both of her male teammates. Despite her personal feelings towards the two, she could acknowledge that neither one was a pushover, and with their unique training from Orochimaru himself, they were well above a mere genin level in terms of strength and skill. Turning her attention back towards her team's intended target, she could see that Sakura had leapt back and was crouched once more, ready to spring at a moment's notice. Though what caught the Oto Kunoichi off guard was how feral the young woman looked. The most noticeable difference was that her pink hair was more shaggy, and had a feral look about it, unlike the smooth tresses she had earlier. Her once emerald-colored eyes were now an eerie yellow that seemed to burn with restrained fury, her pupils slit vertically. The last thing that the Oto Kunoichi noticed was how Sakura's own fingernails had grown out noticeably, making them appear to be more like claws than fingernails. What the hell are you? Kin stammered, taking an involuntary step back. Let's just say, Sakura paused, before a sadistic grin spread across her face. That I have ascended beyond being just human. Hearing this, Kin felt a cold chill run down her spine. There was something in her tone, and the grin on her face that told her that the words carried far more weight than she realized. However, before Kin could continue to ponder the pink-haired Kunoichi's words, the sound of movement from behind her alerted her that Zaku was up again, his arms extended towards where the two of them stood. Immediately realizing what he was going to do, her eyes went wide in fear. What the hell are you doing, Zaku? She demanded, fear evident in her voice. Zankakyokua, extreme decapitating airwaves. Zaku exclaimed, completely ignoring that his own teammate being in the line of fire. Shit, Kin thought as she tried to jump away to avoid being caught in her idiotic teammate's attack. However, she wasn't fast enough as she was caught in a high-pressured mixture of sound waves and airwaves shot forth from the holes in the spiky-haired genin's hands into the area in front of him, sending her flying into one of the trees with a sickening thud as the attack obliterated everything in its path, leaving only dust, debris and splinters from the shattered tree trunks. The attack had just narrowly missed the mud dome that the two remaining members of Team 7 were in, shearing off a sizable chunk from the side of the mud structure. Ha! Zaku laughed through labored breath due to the exertion of his attack. Not so tough now, are ya, bitch? What the hell did you do, Zaku? Dosu choked out, rubbing his throat. Hyuga is going to be pissed that you killed Kin. The bandaged genin was not looking forward to giving that report, knowing full well how explosive the red-headed Kunoichi could be when it came to Kin. Hell, there were even rumors circulating quietly in Otogakure that the two Kunoichi were lesbians with how protective they were about one another. Though none were stupid enough to say it loud enough for either of them to hear. You're a fucking Dosu. Just tell the bitch that the tree huggers killed her. Zaku scoffed before turning his attention the devastation that he had caused from his attack. A cocky grin on his face. Shame about the other bitch though, bet she would have been a good. Whatever, let's just go and kill the other two. Dosu stated, not wanting to listen his teammates' perverted fantasies. No use leaving loose ends. The two of them began to make their way towards the dome shelter before a sound of a scoff from their side caught their attention, forcing them to freeze in their tracks. Slowly turning, the two male genin saw Sakura kneeling over the broken form of Kin, whom was coughing up a large amount of blood, the pinket's hands glowing green as they floated over the wounded Kunoichi's body, alleviating some of the girl's pain and partially healing her wounds enough to keep her from dying. Endangering your own teammate in hopes of hitting your enemy. Sakura scoffed, clearly disgusted by the boy's actions. You and the Uchiha prick would get along great together. What the hell? Zaku exclaimed. You should be nothing but a smear on one of these trees. How the hell did you survive my attack? Don't tell me that's all you got. Sakura spoke with a condescending smirk as took note of the spiky-haired genin's lack of breath. Completely disregarding his question, slowly she stood up and moved away from the prone form of the Otogaku Kunoichi. Blow your load once and done. Zaku was absolutely livid at her remark, quickly catching on to his double meaning. Bringing his arms up once more, he prepared to charge up his attack one more time, ignoring the protests of pain shooting up and down his arms as he prepared to fire his technique once more. However, the Pinkett had other ideas as she disappeared from her position and reappeared right in front of the Oto genin, striking him in the solar plexus with enough force to send him tumbling backwards. Not giving his teammate time to react, Sakura spun on her heel and caught Dozu in the jaw with a spinning heel kick. Fucking bitch, the spiky-haired genin exclaimed in frustration, infuriated that the pink-haired Kunoichi was giving him and Dozu such a hard time. Bringing his right hand up again, he prepared to charge another blast of sound, a maniacal grin spreading across his face. However, Sakura was having none of it and quickly grabbed the offending arm and yanked it forward while bringing her opposite elbow upwards, delivering a devastating blow to the poor boy's jaw with enough force to lift him off the ground by a few inches. Not finished. While still holding on to the boy's limb, the Pinkett pivoted on her heel and hip-tossed him to the ground before twisting his arm with enough force to dislocate it at the shoulder, effectively neutralizing him and allowing her to focus on her remaining opponent. It is clear you are far stronger than our intel had suggested. Dosu commented, slowly standing and backing away slightly, knowing full well that he stood no chance on his own against the Kunoichi before him. Noting that she had barely even broken a sweat while dispatching Zaku. Orochimaru purposely withheld information from you, Sakura quipped, causing the lone genin to growl to himself at the insinuation. That Orochimaru-sama would purposely withhold information that could potentially get him and his team killed, unless. Could Orochimaru-sama have sent us to our death on purpose? Dosu quietly mused to himself, remembering that their orders were to attack and kill the Uchiha and the pink-haired Kunoichi. At the time he didn't question his orders, but now that the young woman before him had implied they were deceived, it made him wonder. Now, I suggest you take this sack of shit and leave. Sakura stated as she tossed Sakura roughly towards the remaining Oto genin, breaking the bandaged boy out of his musings, as well as earning a pained grunt from the spiky-haired boy as he landed at the bandaged genin's feet in a heap. Wordlessly, Dosu knelt down and draped Zaku's one good arm over his shoulder to support his teammate as he brought him to his feet. Reaching into his jacket with his free hand, the bandaged genin produced his team's scroll and dropped it on the ground as a sort of peace offering. It is clear that our team is no match for you, he stated before scowling at the still prone form of Kin. Kin, get your up, we're leaving. I don't think so, she's staying with me, Sakura stated as she positioned herself between the two boys and the vulnerable Kunoichi. A prisoner of war, if you will. There was no way Sakura was going to leave her at the mercy of her two teammates. Especially after witnessing firsthand how neither of the boys held any regard for their teammates' safety or welfare. As for the girls' loyalty towards Orochimaru, Sakura would find out how strong it is later on when Naruto woke up. Look underneath the underneath as Kakashi had once told them. Clenching his fist in anger, Dosu gave a stiff nod and jumped away with Zaku, leaving the two Kunoichi alone. Sakura waited a few seconds to see if the Oto genin was stupid enough to return, but as the seconds ticked by she figured he was smarter than he looked and turned her attention towards the still prone Kunoichi with a slight grimace. Moving to the raven-haired Kunoichi's side, the Pinkett's hands glowed green as she began to do an in-depth diagnosis scan of her body, taking note of all of the damage her teammate's attack had done to her. Cracked spine, though not completely broken. Good, Sakura mentally commented. 2 cracked ribs, minor damage to the internal organs, namely the spleen and liver. The Pinkett frowned at this, as the damage was beyond her capabilities to heal completely. The most she could do is make the girl comfortable and stabilize her for transport until they could get her to Haku. Not completely trusting leaving the raven-haired girl alone with the medics once they arrived at the tower, knowing the girl's teammates would have easy access to her. Which led to the pink-haired Hanyu's next dilemma. Unlike Naruto, Sakura wasn't as adverse in traveling through the shadow world with a passenger, having only performed the technique by herself. In theory it should be simple, just hold on to the individual and navigate them to their destination. In practice, however, it was not as easy. One misstep, One miscalculation and the passenger could be lost in limbo between worlds. Why? A weak voice sounded, breaking the pink-haired Hanyu from her musing. Turning, she could see the pained eyes of the Oto Kunoichi. Because you're in need of help. Sakura gave a reassuring smile as she set to work crafting a makeshift splint to support the injured young woman's back, to give added support along the spine to prevent further injury. Don't get me wrong, however, I don't completely trust you either, since you did admit to working for Orochimaru. Kin could only flinch at the statement, but offered a silent nod to the pink-haired girl who was tending to her wounds. To be fair, the raven-haired Kunoichi couldn't blame the pinkette for the lack of trust. Practically everyone who served under the Snake Sanin was either forced into servitude, like she had been when the man had killed her parents and kidnapped her at a young age. Others had willingly joined under the promise of power, like her now former teammates had done, and had taken advantage of their positions of power over others. What's with all the racket out here? A masculine voice sounded from the earth dome that Sakura had created. Can't a guy get any sleep around here? Snapping her head in the direction of the voice so fast, Kin could have sworn she could have heard the girl's neck snap. Sakura saw her blonde maid emerging from the makeshift shelter she had created. Almost immediately the recently awakened blonde Hanyu found himself nearly toppled over as his pink-haired mate had collided into him, engulfing him in nearly a bone-crushing hug as she sobbed into his chest. Chuckling slightly, Naruto wrapped his arms around her frame, bringing his right hand up to comb through her pink hair. She said not to worry and that you would be fine. Sakura sobbed quietly, complete ignoring the injured Kunoichi she was tending to prior. But Jashin, I thought I lost you. I'm sorry for worrying you, Sakura-chan. The blonde Hanyu smiled, kissing the top of the pinkette's head before turning his attention to the raven-haired Kunoichi, whom looked a little flustered by the show of affection between the two. And who do we have here? This is Kin. Sakura paused, realizing she didn't know the Oto Kunoichi's last name. Tsuchi. The black-haired girl responded for the pinkette. Kin Tsuchi. Ah, that's right, you're with the team from Otogakure, right? Naruto questioned, recalling seeing her during the first part of the exams with her other teammates, as well as when he passed her the answers from his shadow. What happened to you? Got hit with my so-called teammate's attack. Kin replied with a slight wince as she carefully moved herself into a sitting position, leaning against the tree. We were ordered by Orochimaru to hunt down and kill the Uchiha. Hearing the Snake Sanin's name, the whiskered blonde narrowed his eyes. You work for Orochimaru? He questioned, the cold edge in his voice as killing intent began to roll off of him, frightening the injured Kunoichi. Not by choice. She stammered quickly, hoping to placate the blonde before her. It worked, as the killing intent began to recede. A simple gesture from the blonde before her encouraged her to continue. There are three types of people in Otogakure, those like myself that have been forced to join by some means. Those that had willingly joined Orochimaru under the promise of power, like my supposed teammates. Lastly, those that feel they have no choice but to serve under Orochimaru, like a friend of mine. Both Naruto and Sakura when they heard the last part, both Hanyu coming to the conclusion that someone close to the girl was trapped in servitude to the snake. The whiskered Hanyu decided to file that away for later. So how did you end up serving Orochimaru? Kin was silent for a handful of seconds, her shoulders slouching slightly. My parents sold me to him when I was 6 years old when he arrived in our village, looking for potential students, or so he said. Kin snorted. My parents didn't even hesitate. Just threw me at his feet and took the money and left. The raven-haired girl let out a mirthless chuckle. It was a sort of poetic karma that my first mission after graduating the academy was to track down my former parents and kill them. She continued, her eyes seemingly unfocused as she recalled the memory. When I found them, they believed I was there to deliver more money from Orochimaru for being a successful student. I gave them what they wanted and placed them under a multi-layered genjutsu that made them believe the boiling pot of oil on the stove was full of gold, then watched as they selfishly showered themselves in it. You probably think I am a monster. Kin sighed. I watched as their greed set their house on fire with them alongside it. But I felt nothing. No sympathy, no guilt. Nothing. No, Kin-san. Naruto spoke after a moment of silence. I don't think you were a monster. You were betrayed by those who were supposed to protect you, and I can relate as my father did the same to me. He wanted me to be mentally broken and used as a mindless weapon for the village. This caught Kin's attention as she looked to the blonde. Kabuto had briefed her team on what was known of the members of Team 7 to prepare them for the mission, including the fact that the Uzumaki was the current Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi and who his parents were. So it was surprising to hear from the whiskered teenager that the revered Yondaime could be so cold and heartless to his own child. While not as severe as both of your experiences, Sakura began, my own mother attempted to manipulate me for her own gains as well, and for a while she was succeeding until I was given a wake-up call on our first mission outside of the village. So what is your plan now, Kin-san? Naruto inquired, looking to the injured Kunoichi. Well, technically I am her prisoner, since she took out my entire team. The raven-haired girl replied, gesturing towards Sakura. Though since we failed our objective, I can only imagine how Orochimaru will be punishing those two bastards. Won't be surprised if he orders my own death too, since I was captured. Well, it's settled then. The Uzumaki stated, you'll just have to stay with us. Wah what, was Kin's intelligent response. But, what about Orochimaru? Don't worry about him, Naruto smirked. If anything, he should be worried about me because right now, he is at the top of my shit list. Kin could only stare at the whiskered blonde in disbelief. Anyone would have been frightened by the prospect of having the snake Sannin coming after them, but the Uzumaki before her was simply brushing it off, almost as if he viewed Orochimaru as some sort of pest. Since you stated that Orochimaru will no doubt mark you for death, there is one thing I need to ask of you. And that is, Kin inquired, knowing she had little choice in the matter. When we get the chance, I need you to report everything you know about what Orochimaru is planning to the Hokage. Naruto explained, while he didn't expect the girl would know much, any potential information could be helpful. I doubt someone like him would invest time in a genin team for the exam just to give the Uchiha his curse mark and leave. Wait, he marked the Uchiha, Kin exclaimed, surprised by this revelation. Tried to mark me too, Sakura stated in disgust, shuddering at the phantom memory of the experience. Damn bastard sent us on a suicide mission, Kin thought as she grit her teeth in anger, knowing the power the curse seal could bestow on those that survived the process since her friend and sister-like figure had also received the same curse seal. So, we got a deal. Naruto broke her from her inner musing. I don't know much, since it was obvious my team and I weren't intended to survive this encounter. She admitted, but I will tell your Hokage everything I know. Fair enough. The blonde nodded before positioning himself in front of her so she could climb onto his back, causing her to blush slightly but climbed on regardless. For now, how about we get out of this forest? Yeah, think we've all had enough of this camping trip, Sakura commented with a slight smirk. Meanwhile, Naruto wordlessly detached his shadow to form his dark clone to carry the still unconscious Uchiha. Mostly as a precaution in case the raven-haired boy woke up during their trek to the tower, not knowing how he would react to the curse mark in the event it acted up during the trip. Once the Uchiha was secured on the clone's back, the group took to the trees to make a beeline towards the center tower. It had taken a little under an hour for the 5 genin to arrive at the base of the tower, and a further 15 minutes to find the only entrance that happened to be on the other side of the structure, much to the quartet's annoyance. And here we are, finally, Naruto commented as they entered the large entrance, gazing up at the plaque that was mounted in the center of the wall before them that read, if qualities of heaven are your desire to acquire wisdom and knowledge to take your minds higher, if earthly qualities are what you lack, train your body in the fields and prepare to attack. When both heaven and earth are opened together, the path to peril will revert to the righteous path forever. This is the secret way. That guides us on from this place today. Does that mean? Kin exclaimed as she read the riddle on the wall multiple times. Actually, it's pretty obvious, Naruto stated as he adjusted Kin's weight slightly as he took out the 2 scrolls he had and tossed them to Sakura. Here, open both of them and cross them over each other. Wordlessly, the Pinkett set to work as she was instructed. Meanwhile the raven-haired Kunoichi still holding on to the whiskered teen's back could only look on in confusion. What do you mean it's obvious? That up there makes no sense. I can see how it looks like that, a lot of the words are just there to try and confuse us. But, it blatantly states, when heaven and earth are opened together, which indicates the scrolls. 1 heaven scroll, 1 earth scroll, Naruto explained. As if to prove his deduction correct, the 2 scrolls started to produce a large amount of smoke, indicating the signs of a summoning jutsu. As the smoke cleared, it revealed the form of Iruka Yumino, the now former academy instructor for a majority of the genin participants in the exams. Yo! The scarred Chunin greeted the group. It's been a while, I hope you're not here to test us again. Naruto grinned at the man before him, causing Iruka to wince slightly at the reminder of how he tried to test if Naruto was ready for the exams. Anyways, who do we have here? Iruka inquired, shifting the conversation to the raven-haired kunoichi that was on the Uzumaki's back. Well, long story short, her team attacked ours and failed, and now she is our prisoner of war, so to speak of. The whiskered Hanyu explained, giving the abbreviated version of what transpired in the forest. I know you have questions, however it is important that I talk with the old man as soon as he is free to do so, and we need to get the Uchiha-san to the infirmary as well as have Kakashi-sensei take a look at the mark Sasuke-san has on his neck. Normally, Iruka would have been tempted to pry for more information as to what had all transpired, but hearing the tone in his former student's voice led to the dire importance of what was said. Giving a silent nod, the scarred Chunin signaled for the doors to open to allow entry to the participants. Hokage-sama is in a meeting with the council right now, so I'll take Sasuke to the infirmary and notify Kakashi-san that he is needed there. Yumino stated as he took the unconscious form the Sasuke Uchiha from Naruto's clone, allowing it to melt into the ground once more and connect itself to Naruto once more. Meanwhile, you three still have another 2 days before the second phase is over, so grab a room and rest up. Rooms are first come, first serve. The scarred Chunin instructed. As soon as Hokage-sama is free, I will inform him that you need to talk to him. With that, Iruka disappeared with the Uchiha, leaving the three alone with their pick of the allotted rooms, as so far only one team had arrived before them, and that was the Suna team. Which didn't surprise Naruto nor Sakura any, considering what they knew of the team. Suppose this room is as good as any, Naruto commented as they stopped at a door. Opening it exposed a room with its own bathroom and 3 separate beds, no doubt intended for the entire team to share the room. And since Sasuke was no doubt going to be bedridden in the infirmary for an unknown amount of time, it was perfect for the 3 of them. Carefully, Naruto set Kin down on the center bed, allowing her to make herself comfortable. I'll have to see if Haku-chan can come and do a full scan as soon as I can. She is far more skilled as a medic than I am, Sakura stated as she sat down on the other bed that was on the right side of the room and closest to the bathroom. But as far as I can tell, you should be fine as long as you don't overexert yourself. Hey Sakura-chan, you mind keeping Kin-san company? Naruto inquired suddenly, prompting the 2 girls to look at him. Almost immediately Sakura understood why. Sure, go talk to her, Naruto-kun. The Pinkett smiled, which earned a confused look from the raven-haired kunoichi. Without saying anything else, Naruto gave a short salute to bid them farewell before he sunk into his own shadow into the floor and disappeared. Wait, what's going on? Kin inquired, looking to the Pinkett for answers. Anko-chan. Sakura smiled sadly. She was injured pretty badly by Orochimaru in the forest. It's the reason the snake bastard is at the top of Naruto-kun's shit list, as he calls it. Upper levels of the tower. The sound of sniffling echoed throughout the barren room that was isolated on the uppermost floors of the central tower. Sunlight filtered through the mostly closed curtains that gently swayed with the breeze. In the corner of the room, sat the disheveled form of the resident snake mistress, Anko Mitarashi. Her tan trench coat hanging loosely off one shoulder as she attempted to wipe the tears that fell from her face with her coat sleeve. Steadily rocking back and forth on the balls of her feet. Anko-chan. A voice she recognized called into the dimly lit room. The snake mistress tensed as she heard his voice, a feeling of apprehension flooding her body as she forced herself to stand and gaze in the direction the voice came from. Slowly, 1 foot at a time, she edged towards the entrance of the room where her blonde maid awaited her. As his form slowly came into view, her body seemingly moved on its own until she felt a pair of strong arms wrap around her, pulling her into a firm embrace. It was then that the dam broke. All the tears she fought to hold back had broken through as she began to sob and mumble incoherently into his chest as she slowly began to drop to her knees in the center of the room, with the blonde Hanyu following her. Never breaking his embrace as he let her vent all of her emotions that had no doubt built up since the incident that happened within the Forest of Death, 3 days ago. All while Anko's embrace around him seemed to tighten, as if afraid that if she let go, he would disappear from her. Shish. Naruto cooed as he held his first mate close, kissing the top of her head. It's all right, I'm here. How can you say that? The snake mistress demanded as she looked up at him. You nearly died, because of me. Because of my selfishness. Gently, Anko pushed away from her blonde mate and stood to pace around the room as she began to ramble. Jashin, If only I hadn't let my fear of abandonment control me. She ranted, though Naruto could tell it was mostly at herself than anything else. Also know that, while odd, it was her way of venting and getting what was bothering her off her chest. I could have learned how to use my abilities to their fullest, and you never would have had to endanger yourself and risk Jashin-sama's wrath. But never, never again. She continued before sharply turning towards Naruto, a renewed determination now burning within her eyes. But, I need your help, Naruto-kun. It was a rare form of admission. Of course, Anko-chan. The blonde Hanyu smiled as he approached her. He knew how hard it was for her to ask for help in any sense, no matter what it was. Even when assigned missions, she would stubbornly argue with Hyuga, who insisted on accompanying her. Something the snake mistress would vehemently argue against, even though she had never once won an argument against the Queen of Blades. We'll start after as soon as these exams are over. Inhaling deeply, Anko closed her eyes before slowly exhaling and slowly opening her eyes once more, allowing her resolution to fully set in. However, there was one question that had been nagging at her for the better part of 3 days. But why? She inquired. Why did you risk Jashin-sama's wrath to save my life? Smiling, Naruto pulled her into a gentle embrace, allowing him to look directly into her eyes. Because you're worth it, he replied, giving her a light peck on the lips. Not to mention, it is my job as the alpha to protect all of you, but beyond that, the family needs their alpha female. Anko stared at him for a handful of seconds, her heart fluttering as she heard his words before she couldn't help but allow a smile to creep to her face. Wrapping her arms around him, she silently thanked him. No more words needed to be said between the two of them, and any lingering doubts that would have haunted her were laid to rest with his answer. She was loved, she was cherished, and that's all that mattered.